Welcome to Proto-Future, the only model railroad podcast willing to call a spade, that modelers who voted for Trump are anti-train, uneducated rural swine and should be ostracized from the hobby. This is Proto-Future Episode 6. It's up to us now. In this episode, I lay out a blueprint for surviving the next administration and the danger posed by our bigoted neighbors. In 2015, I was in a library in Kirkland, Washington, where, for a reason I don't remember, I tripped over a book titled Why Liberals Win the Culture Wars Even When They Lose Elections by Stephen Prothero, a conservative professor of divinity at Harvard. Many years later, during the COVID-19 pandemic, my roommates and I purchased the book while we were reading philosophical tomes out loud to each other to pass the time during lockdown. I disagree with some of it, as his delivery is much more that of a historian than a scientific analyst, being very slow and at times duplicative, but the last chapter stuck with me as profoundly influential. The conclusion of the book is in the title, but he notes even more damningly that, by the time conservatives have adopted a position, it's almost already a signal that their position is antiquated and will be out of vogue in 20 to 40 years. If you zoom out and look at broader history, this is the direction of the world. What used to be a planet of kings and dukes is now filled with elected chancellors and mayors. Where women used to be considered property, they can now vote and take whatever job they wish. Where gay people were burned at the stake, now they lead happy, healthy lives with families of their own. Where there were once societies of religious conformity are now bustling secular metropoli where young people can gather and organize on the terms of their own enjoyment and self-expression, however niche their interests. Of course, that is not to say this is true everywhere all the time, but the places where it is not true are the exceptions to the norm. And if you look across time, it is undeniable that history has a direction. Every Russia for suppression of its gays, Iran for its suppression of women, China for its suppression of gender benders, Israel for its suppression of ethnic minorities, or at present, United States of America for its suppression of all of the above, is, in the grand scheme of things, simply but a bump in the road. I will not deny we are on a particularly bumpy stretch of road at the moment, and to even get here, the US had to try 3 times, the Revolution, the Civil War, and civil rights. Europe had to try 6, 1789, 1793, 1830, 1848, and World Wars I and II, but the road still has a direction. People have a demonstrable interest in fighting back, and it has yet to be sufficiently demonstrated that conservatism will ever hold the day on historical timescales, much less geologic ones. As a newfound content creator, and dare I even call myself an influencer, I feel compelled to use my platform to direct the conversation and help those in need of a few words to describe the situation. If I can boil my message down to anything, it would be this. Liberals will win the culture wars, even when we lose elections. It will be all right in the end. It may take a while. It may even take longer than our lifetimes. It may even happen first elsewhere and only end in the United States, but the conservative, racist, xenophobic, nationalist ideologies we see today will be stamped out by the progress of time. That's not an excuse to not act now, to not make it better sooner, but it is an invitation to not take despair. We will win the war, irrespective of the outcome of the battle. When it comes to the present situation, I'm not so much angry as I am disappointed. We already knew that a large swath of the country were illiterate racist deplorables, people from a different era put upon by malicious economic forces, but too unintelligent to know what's good for them, people so stupid and emotional that they'd sign away their own rights and well-being to a self-absorbed demagogue just because he stroked their lizard brains and withered masculinity. But this is already the fight we've been fighting for almost a dozen years. Nothing is new here. 2016 was shocking, 2024 is just annoying, if existentially. I will not deny that people will be hurt, people you know, people I know. Some will probably be imprisoned for doing the right thing. I may be one of them. This will be a terrible time for trains in transit, as both Project 2025 and Agenda 47 were explicitly anti-transit and pro-car, to say nothing of a hatred for cities. It will not be a good time, for us or anybody we care for, but this is not an alien threat, It is a known one. The mechanisms of resistance are already there, and they're spinning up again right now. That begs the question, though, what are we to do about this? Well, there's one thing I can take hope in. The Democrats ran a fundamentally centrist campaign. Joe Biden is the epitome of work within a broken system, Kamala Harris had only one watered-down message of something support the middle class, and basically the entire Democratic political machine for the past quarter century has taken their much more progressive base for granted, ignoring the everyday working-class socialist, queers, minorities, and allies that know from exhaustive experience that the system is broken and set up to fail for all but the wealthiest. It is a party composed of the working class, but which acts more like moderate bankers from a bygone era under the nebulous, vapid, and counterproductive guise of bipartisanship. Personally, I fundamentally loved Hillary. I voted for her. I think she was a political genius born way too early, but there's no world in which I would have chosen her over Bernie Sanders. The system is rotten at the core, the other side is electing people who, quote, fight like hell, and I'd like a slate of candidates who promise to fight like hell, but for me, for the correct way of viewing things, and for a vision of the future better than the past, not a vision of the future that represents a return to the past and all its inequalities. And that's where I think we can win. I fundamentally believe that at least most people are rational. If you sit them down and explain something to them, it may take a while, but they can presumably see logic and evidence where it's at. The way to appeal to them is not to water down your message so much that it loses its core and is basically something so shallow and empty, which they already believe in, as people can smell a snake and know when they're being manipulated. Rather, you should stand behind something because there is a reason to stand behind it, because it's logical and evidence-based. If you do that, if you stand by your convictions, it's a much more convincing and appealing proposition than kowtowing to the mildly racist middle America. And I would hope it translates to electoral wins, but even if it doesn't, it will result in cultural wins. With any luck, I desperately hope that the Democratic Party will take this as a lesson that the only way forward is to be more overtly socialist. Enough about us and the broader political environment. How does this translate to you? What can you do? Well, for one, immediately pause this podcast and go donate $25 a month. $5 to Black Lives Matter or an immigrant defense organization, $5 to a local environmental fund or nature conservancy, $5 to a transit or urbanism initiative like my friends at the Rail Passengers Association, High Speed Rail Alliance, or Strong Towns, $5 to a Palestinian or Ukrainian refugee organization, and $5 to a very local Democratic candidate, a state representative or senator, maybe a mayor or council person. I donate much more than $25 a month, on a graduate student's salary no less, but as far as this exercise goes, my chosen recipients are Black Lives Matter, the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, the Rail Passengers Association, the High Speed Rail Alliance, Strong Towns, the Parking Reform Network, Nova Ukraine, the Red Cross and Crescent, Oxfam, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and Pennsylvania Commonwealth Representative Paul Takak. Also, please do seriously consider a digital subscription to newspapers or other local journalists. Their writing style is genuinely superb, and two of the best things I've ever done were get a subscription to The Atlantic and to my local CityCast podcast, CityCast Pittsburgh. They have a total of 13 podcasts countrywide, the others being Philadelphia, Washington, Houston, Austin, Nashville, Chicago, Madison, Denver, Salt Lake, Las Vegas, Boise, and Portland. They are a magnificent organization that deserves your listenership now more than ever. Make all of these donations recurring, such that you don't have to think about it and you're doing the right thing automatically. Sure, it's not cheap, but it's, 3 to 4 lattes a month, or a 6-pack of good craft beer, at least at Pennsylvania's steep alcohol tax. It's small enough you wouldn't really notice it, but big enough to make a difference. As a general rule, I've made it such that I shouldn't support a position I'm not willing to put money towards. When I found myself railing against minimum parking requirements to a family member, I made my way shortly thereafter to the Parking Reform Network and set up a small recurring donation. More than anything else in the world, more than voting even, this is how we make change. If you can, also sign up for personal advocacy. If you lack the funds to donate to causes of import, and especially if you have a flexible schedule, like if you're a student, artist, cafe worker, or what have you, sign up and donate your time. Canvass for issues, or be a dedicated protest organizer. We're going to need a lot of those in the coming years. People who can make extra signs, stand at a street corner, and hand them out to passersby who didn't know an issue was at hand but are willing to stay there for a half hour in support. Probably almost as important as donating, search up your local municipality's ABCs, authorities, boards, and commissions. Almost every city has openings for planning, transportation, or related committees, advisory boards whom hear ideas and inform the elected city council which courses of action are better for the community. I was going to say this for a future episode, but due to my efforts with this podcast, I've been appointed as a transportation commissioner for State College Borough. My very first motion passed to ban parking on a street, and you have no idea how rewarding it was to see physical reflective metal signs erected as a result of my efforts. This is an often neglected space of governance that average citizens can take part in and help to resist the oncoming onslaught of pro-car, anti-pedestrian federal policies. It doesn't matter how car-brained the DOTs make their business loops and state highways if we can rob the drivers of all their parking spaces. Acres of asphalt throughway will do nothing if we can make it as painful and expensive as possible to stow vehicles at destinations. And once you've sent off your donations and local transportation commission application, immediately contact your minority friends. Ask them if they're doing okay, if they need any help. Listen to what they have to say. Learn more about the experience of living as a person of color, woman, gay, trans, or disabled American. It will break your heart, but they have to live it every day. If you don't have any friends of a particular identity group, then yikes, that's a problem that you should probably fix immediately. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that if the attendance of your local model railroad club lacks members from any of those categories, then that's a serious problem for the long-term viability of your club, and you should instantaneously enact a DEI program to increase diversity among your membership if you are to appeal to and set yourself up for success among the next, more diverse generation of model railroaders. Anyway, the only way we'll make it through this is with collective action and mutual aid. For example, in the wake of DeSantis' heinous dehumanizing of genderqueer Floridians, the Underground Railroad was literally restarted, a network of decentralized, independent safe houses for LGBTQ youth to safely flee north. I imagine we're going to be seeing a lot more of things like those in the coming years, community resistance to an oppressive, anti-freedom regime. One of your minority friends may very well need help like this soon, and I sincerely hope you'll offer it to them. You don't have to be a member of a targeted minority to be an ally, and fourth wave intersectional civil rights has taught us that we all must fight for each other's freedoms because we're stronger together. Now, those are my best resistance recommendations for the moment, but if you'll permit me, I think there's more to be said. For one, for your own safety and for the safety of the ones you love and are in your care, move out of the country if you can, and if not, move to a blue state, and, barring that, move to a blue city. My sister moved to Switzerland on a whim, and I was genuinely astonished at how easy it was. Basically, everybody in big cities far away speaks English, and you'd be surprised how easy it is to learn a foreign language if you just give it a few years. Germany just massively liberalized their immigration laws in favor of knowledge workers and offers citizenship and voting rights in as little as 3 years with state-subsidized language courses. I've heard wonderful things from Ireland, Portugal, and Poland, and probably anywhere in Europe is easier than you'd think. Especially if you're young, this is the time to look to study overseas, and I guarantee you that you won't regret it. It'll make you the talk of the town while you're there, and if you come back, it'll make you the talk of the town while you're here. I do acknowledge that this dictum has a bit of upper-class privilege to it, and I am genuinely trying to check that part of myself in giving these recommendations, but at least try. You can FaceTime your family while you're away, your flat can offer them rent-free housing to visit you, and it's at least worth approaching your local bank to see if they'd give you a student loan. It's hard, but it's not impossible, and I promise it's rewarding. Barring overseas, Canada is amazing, at least in the Vancouver and Montreal areas, not Toronto so long as Doug Ford is in power. Mexico, too, may be worth your time, especially if you share heritage or language. I've heard good things, at least for walkability, and it seems to be on the upswing with their recent progressive government. If you can't move overseas, move to a big city in a blue state. This may frankly be your only chance of safety at the coming administration, getting the backing of a state big and powerful enough to protect your rights and self-expression and resist attempts to take them away. If all of America can't be guaranteed gender, sexuality, and bodily autonomy, and decent transit, at least some of it could. We already tried strategic democracy by living in swing states. That clearly hasn't worked. Thus, I instead recommend so many people move to blue states that we overpower the racist rural dingletards just purely by electoral college vote allocation. States should compete for our tax dollars, and living in a place filled with frothing-at-the-mouth fascist idiots is not an appealing quality-of-life proposition. So let's drain them of their prosperity and teach them that taking away our freedom of gender expression is a path towards outmigration and economic decay. Literally, though, the quality of life in healthcare is demonstrably better in blue states, and I want to make the point that life in big cities doesn't have to be much more expensive than you're thinking. The median purchase price for a car these days is $68,000, which is insane. That's nearly twice a typical person's yearly salary. Some estimates place the median cost of owning any car at $18,000 a year. That means that, if you move to a big city with good transit where you can live car-free, mathematically, your rent could be up to $1,499 a month more expensive, and you'd still be making a profit over living in a small town which is car-dependent. In getting patron feedback while preparing this episode, patron Linda Eskin informed me that she made a spreadsheet and did the calculations, finding that every extra mile she drove to work each day was equivalent to a $1,000 a year salary cut. Houston has some of the cheapest housing in the country, but its cost of living is also higher than Manhattan because so many people live so far away and have to drive to do anything. Cars cost so much money, people genuinely have no idea, and giving up one is both something which you can do in a blue city and which would allow you to afford a blue city. Make a spreadsheet for yourself, calculating cost of living, and see what it tells you. Now, stepping back for a second here, I want to make it clear I'm not taking an elitist perspective that you should drop your job, friends, and everything and move overseas or to a big blue city immediately and at great expense. Instead, I'm suggesting this be part of a larger program of strategic thinking. The average person moves at least 4 times during their life, once for college, once after college, once in the middle of their careers, and once for retirement. What I suggest instead is utilizing these natural nodes in the human lifespan to your tactical advantage. If you have the liquidity, of course, drop everything right now and move to another country. But if you're a normal person, if you're eyeing a career change or considering schools, something which you'd already have to move for, use this moment to strategically look to better yourself and your quality of life, while sticking it to the conservatives that threaten your safety. If you're thinking of retiring, for God's sakes, please don't move to Florida, Texas, or Arizona. There are better and more interesting and rewarding places, and even if they have higher taxes, it beats moving to a largely car-dependent area where you will have a terrible, lonely life, isolated from all of your friends when you become too old to drive anymore. If you're worried about living too far away from family, and if you're worried about moving, period, as someone who's lived in 10 different cities in 6 different states, I promise you, it's nowhere near as difficult as you think. I once packed up all my stuff into a car and road tripped across the entire country from Washington to New York, not even having an apartment for when I arrived. I landed on my feet and had new friends and a satisfying life within 3 months. The excitement of moving to a new place and making new friends more than offsets any anxiety accrued along the way. But it's also a matter of consistent and continuous choice for the better. This election means that nobody is coming to save us. It's up to us now. Don't wait to bring transit or bicycle infrastructure to the place you live. That will take too long and may never happen under the next administration/emperorship. Instead, move to a place where good transit and bicycle routes already exist. If everybody makes their next move in the direction of a place with eco-friendly transportation and climate resiliency, then it becomes a requirement for cities to offer climate resiliency if they are to have any decent growth or tax income, and instead of waiting for a slow and conservative small-town suburban government to make the barest of changes, you can enjoy the wonders of eco-friendly transit now while forcing the car-dependent places to face the consequences of their ways. In essence, you need to be the change you want to see in the world, and pining for better trains, light rail, and bicycle trails while still driving everywhere means your priorities are misaligned. You must instead make cities compete for you in a free market of tax dollars by providing the amenities that we desire. So, if you can move abroad, do so, and take your tax money elsewhere. If you're in a red state, look to move to the nearest blue state the next time you change jobs. If you're looking to go to college and get accepted to 2 places, pick the university that divested from Israel and was kinder to its student protesters. If you're stuck in a red state and absolutely cannot leave because you have to live near your family, keep an eye out for job openings, at least in the nearest blue city. You don't have to up and leave everything immediately and at great cost or disruption, but instead consistently push in the direction of a better life for yourself and reward places that make lives better for others at the natural chapter breaks of your own existence. Actually, expanding on that, this philosophy can and should be applied to all areas of your life beyond just moving and tax dollars. The single biggest thing you can do right now to reduce your carbon footprint is to go vegetarian, ideally vegan. It's nowhere near as hard to be vegetarian as when I started almost 20 years ago, and being vegetarian no longer means you have to stay alone at home when friends go out and eat, or eat only salads. Almost everywhere these days has an Impossible Burger or dish that could have meat easily substituted out of it on the menu, and it doesn't even impact your health or nutrition negatively. I've been vegetarian since before I hit puberty, yet I'm now 190 centimeters and over 100 kilograms. I'm not lacking for nutrients. So it's not that hard, it's just making a consistent choice. Instead of getting the steak, get the ravioli. Instead of the omelet, get the avo toast. You don't have to be perfect about it. Nobody's going to strip you of your socialist's license if you forget and slip up one day. But you really should make a concerted effort to reduce meat and animal product consumption. There's even a movement these days called Reducitarian, where people don't go full vegetarian but drastically reduce the amount of meat they eat. I guess by proxy, I'm reduce-a-tegan, since I'm now trying to be vegan but genuinely forget how many things are made with butter. If given the option, choose the more humane and climate-friendly food, and just do your best to always give yourself the option. The second biggest thing you can do to reduce your carbon footprint is to give up driving. Not only is there the economic reason, as I outlined earlier, cars are the single largest source of emissions in the developed world, whereas climate arson by livestock is spread over multiple categories and has multiple causes. You've heard me rail about car dependency before, but for now, I'll just give you 2 quotes from the scientific literature. First one, betting solely on EVs would add half of the national electricity demand and require an excessive amount of critical materials. Electrification is not a silver bullet. There is therefore a need for a wide range of policies that include measures to reduce vehicle ownership and usage. And the second one, only by reductions in the convenience of car travel or large increases in its monetary costs can large and sustained reductions in travel greenhouse gas emissions be produced. This is also something I wanted to save for another future episode, but I just recently sold my car. Even though I'm still living in a small car-dependent town in the middle of nowhere and haven't moved to a dream big city yet, it was genuinely surprising to me how little going car-free affected my life. A bicycle is truly sufficient for daily errands, and for the rare occasions it's not, I'm looking at getting a cargo bicycle. Yes, the premium cargo e-bike would be my third bicycle and cost about $9,000, and that's a lot for a bicycle, but it's barely the cost of the options of a new car, and doesn't need gas money at all. And yes, this has prevented me from my infinitudinal road tripping to every small-town corner of Pennsylvania, but having been to Lock Haven, and Williamsport, and Clearfield, and Dubois, and Mercer, and Grampian, and Mifflinburg-Townville, and Lewisburg-Townville, and Harrisburg-Townville, and Pottsburg-Townville, and Pittsburgh-Townville, I can exhaustively and definitively conclude to you that I'm not missing anything by having given up a car, and nor would you. These towns may have cute individual B&Bs or breweries to visit, but so long as they voted red and are not accessible by Amtrak or bicycle trails, they absolutely do not deserve my sales tax dollars. It's like the dressing aisle at the grocery store. Who really needs the choice between 4,000 different types of salad dressings and 30 different Thousand Islands? Living life on a bicycle, as well as by transit and walking, is much more rewarding and curated. You do have access to fewer things, but were most of those things you lose access to really that important to begin with, or that enjoyable? My experience tells me no. If you do these 2 things, giving up animal products and selling your car, you can reduce your carbon footprint by up to 80%. Since the EPA will soon likely be crippled or disbanded, we need to take charge and protect the environment ourselves. Sure, you may be limiting yourself, but that doesn't mean you have to be miserable. At the very least, give it a shot, because with the impending climate collapse, it's not like we have a choice to keep doing the same things we've been doing all along. Change your habits now on your own terms, or they will be changed for you later by global warming. You should also expand your horizons and use your consumer choices to push for a better world denied to us by our political enemies in rural America. Don't go to Starbucks because their CEO commits climate arson, but also try to avoid every large chain you can. They drain local economies and come with massively polluting supply chains. Eat local wherever possible. Go to farmers markets. Shop in person, not Amazon. Don't ever order DoorDash or Uber Eats. Instead, bicycle to get takeout yourself. Frankly, avoid rideshare, and preferentially build your life around transit lines. Reduce your use of plastics as much as possible. Of course, plastic does have a place in the world, mostly on model train layouts, but things like grocery bags, straws, snack wrappers, and microwavable meal trays are sneaky ways big oil has addicted us to using their products, and that's to say nothing of the growing threat of microplastics being a major cause of health problems and chronic inflammation. I highly recommend Grove Collaborative as a source of sustainable daily necessities, like soaps, shampoos, deodorants, laundry detergents, and concentrated cleaning supplies, all packaged in actually recyclable glass, aluminum, and paper. When it comes to travel, don't start with a place in mind. Instead, look to destinations along more sustainable rail routes rather than taking a road trip or flying. If you absolutely must go overseas, pick a destination with good rail transit such that you don't have to rent a car while you're there, and purchase carbon offsets for the flight. If you stay domestically, look up the 2024 election results and only visit places that voted for Harris. Don't give your hard-earned money to Nazis. If you're doing business, don't open a branch or factory in a red area. Irrespective of whatever tax incentives they might offer, we've seen from Boeing's build quality issues that those places are filled with uneducated, unmotivated, low-skill workers who will imperil the reputation of your company. Also, avoid banking with Bank of America, as their CEO donated millions to Trump and as such has demonstrated poor decision-making capacity, which has led to bad investments and poor credit ratings. And obviously, if you have to buy a car, get a Rivian and not a Tesla, because the elongated muskrat is a sycophantic idiot. And there are a ton of other issues too. Subscribe to the New York Times instead of the Washington Post, because WAPO refused to endorse a candidate at the mandate of owner Jeff Bezos. For that reason too, end your Amazon Prime subscription and find alternative suppliers of your daily needs. Arrange with your local power company to purchase green energy from windmills or solar panels. Buy clothing from Patagonia rather than a fast fashion cheapo supplier, as Patagonia's clothing is sustainably made and will last longer, creating less waste. Use reusable kitchen towels instead of paper towels, and consider getting a bidet instead of endlessly buying toilet paper. Preferentially patronize woman-owned, minority-owned, and queer-friendly businesses. Avoid businesses headquartered in red states or with openly religious missions, like Hobby Lobby. Even if you do drive, favor the business with small or no parking lots and nearby protected bicycle lanes, and make it clear to the owner that you support multimodal, sustainable transportation. Absolutely never patronize a business in a standalone building surrounded by asphalt. The point is, with everything you do, with every purchase that you make, try to do something good for the world. Look up the values of the corporations you're going to purchase from, and choose the one that's better for the planet. Be willing to take a slight hit to convenience or price if it's for a good cause, a more sustainable future, or better to your fellow humans. Be open to new information and regularly check your assumptions. It won't be easy, but it's better than the alternative of behaving selfishly right up until everything in society collapses. Like I said, you don't have to be perfect, everyone's allowed a mistake now or then, but you should always be trying. Use your everyday spending to create an unignorable profit motive for making the world a better place. The penultimate recommendation I want to give wraps back around to how I opened this podcast. We tried being empathetic and supporting rural people and places. That didn't work. We tried explaining to them logically how evidence-based policies would better their communities. That didn't work. We tried strategically living in swing states. That didn't work. We tried begging for mercy to not take away our rights and freedom of self-expression, and they chose to be cruel and solipsistic. We tried being kind, and they chose the most enduringly American emotion: hate. I think it's our turn to hate them back. These intellectually impaired idiots who cannot be reasoned with live in a fantasy world of a bygone era and represent an impediment to progress. Since they've won the elections, it's time for us to go full culture war. We must thoroughly demonstrate through our words and actions that no amount of political power will make them welcome in modern society. Their ideas are antiquated, offensive, intolerant, obsolete, and moribund. The country and consumeristic lifestyle they love are rotten at the core and have been for a very long time. Make it such that they can't forget it. Do not celebrate Thanksgiving or Independence Day. Do something else with your family on a different day, such as the Native American celebration of Thanks-taking. When your coworkers share their holiday plans, say, "Oh, I didn't know anybody partook in that old thing anymore," as if they're off to do a barbaric religious ceremony. Relatedly, have a hardline policy on secularism. Do not tolerate any discussion of any religion or life force spiritualism deities by your friends, and tell them that their cross necklaces, Catholic fish stickers, and candles in house windows are offensive Nazi symbols, because at this point, that's basically what they are with the right's rhetoric of theocratic nationalism. Religion is a stain on society, and conservatives demonstrate why. If you know someone who wears a MAGA hat, casually call them a maggot, deplorable, and uneducated hillbilly, as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. Freedom of speech is not freedom from the consequences of that speech, and if they do something which makes us judge them harshly, let them know. Don't allow any Trumpkins the privilege of your friendship or kindness. For pity's sake, everyone listening right now, add a question to your pre-operating session sign-up. Did you ever vote for Donald Trump? And do not sully your layout or your ops crew with the likes of their grubby anti-rail voting habits. Continuing on model railroading, if you're lucky enough to have not chosen or committed to a prototype yet, don't set your layout in a small town, red state, or whitewashed 1950s past all these dingalings are harkening back to with homicidal abandon. These are outdated ways of life that we absolutely should not venerate or be glorifying in model form. We should make it clear with our artistry that these are things we do not respect. Our time and attention should instead be spent on modeling dense, diverse cities and climate-friendly walkable lifestyles which represent a more equitable, sustainable future, or the precious few segments of that which existed in the past, prior to the automobile anyway. If you've already chosen an era and it sits on one of these spectra, small towns, a 1950s racist past, or suburban sprawl, change the narrative. Don't model rote history, fix it from how it was. Intentionally put more figures of color on your layout and make sure that they have high-ranking positions. Make a civil rights protest. If you, say, model the Old West and want a hanging scene, hang a Klansman. If you model any automobile road with 4 lanes or more, have a road diet and build a protected cycle track. Delete all parking lots. Even if you model a bleak, industrial-only switching area, build a bicycle path and bike rack so that the factory workers can commute to their jobs by bicycle instead of driving. Hell, even my best frenemy, Madison, Wisconsin, had active transportation accessible warehouses like this. This is yet another idea I've been bandying about for a while, and I promise I'll get to it someday with an episode on how to model urbanism, but for now, the point is, in art, everything is intentional. And at a time when the rights of our queer and minority neighbors are imperiled more than ever, we should make it clear with our art the world we want to see. In effect, this right here is the point of the whole podcast. Back in the real world, we should do similarly to change the conversation on urbanism in our one-to-one scale neighborhoods. If they want to live in their own fantasy world where women are property, trans people don't exist, and the Statue of Liberty isn't emblazoned with the words, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me, I lift my lamp beside the golden door," then we get to live in a fantasy world of our own, where climate-friendly transport is an expected behavioral norm, and private car drivers are extremely weird and dysmorphic aberrations. If someone drives to work from a McMansion in the suburbs, say, "Ooh, you must be really poor to be forced to live so far away." If someone arrives in a lifted pickup truck or a large SUV, say, "Wow, you must be compensating for a really small penis with that gender-affirming vehicle." If someone is a hunter, say, I didn't take you for a blood sport caveman." If someone questions the validity or existence of trans girls or boys, say, "Nobody wants to see you have an episode of toxic masculinity in public, keep it to yourself." If someone says anything about crime in cities, remind them that, statistically, more crime happens per capita in the suburbs and rural areas. Stop watching libs of TikTok and touch grass, you ignorant rube. If you're a bicyclist or a pedestrian and a car cuts you off, flip them the bird and loudly mutter, "murderer," and so on. Say all of this casually, as if it's, again, the most obvious thing in the world to everyone except the person you're talking to. Chip away at the social acceptability of these actions. Make them feel shame and rejection for having these ideas. Make it inescapable in every facet of their lives that, no matter how many branches of government they hold, they cannot make themselves popular, accepted, or relevant. They voted for a fascist because they felt the world they see now is not the world they were born into. Make them know that we are moving on to better things with them or without them, and there is absolutely nothing they could ever do to stop the march of time. The final thing I want to say, and I know this is a tall order, is don't let any of this get to you. The incels, the hypermasculine neo-Nazis, and the conservative boomers want you to feel sad, depressed, defeated. They want you to feel like you've been rejected, outcast, disbarred from society. I myself have recommended a huge slate of life changes and mindset shifts, from up and moving to a new country or city and leaving behind your friends and family to pursue your own safety, to becoming a vegetarian and selling your car to fill the shoes the EPA used to upping the culture wars and perpetually pushing back on every conservative belief you see, to being hyper-aware and universally altering your purchasing habits to put a profit motive to making a more sustainable, inclusive, and healthy future. I can imagine that, to say the least, all of this may be overwhelming. I get that. I'm there with you. Living in an oppressive autocratic regime is not easy, and it will wear on you every day. It was bad enough before, but now we may have been given a front seat to watching the nation be dismantled. However, feeling overwhelmed is taxing, counterproductive, and probably because of that, exactly what the conservative Cro-Magnons want you to feel. As best you can, protect yourself from this. Don't doom scroll and wallow in despair. Act. If you do as much as you can, if you do your very best to make every action count for the better, then you will know that any bad things that follow were not your fault. Turn despondence into conviction, anger into determination. Live every freedom you still have to the fullest in the most public way. Ride every Amtrak long-distance train while they're still around for your vacations. Buy a bicycle and ride for every errand you can to deny Big Oil and Detroit the benefits of an ecocidal administration. Wear whatever clothing you want in public, no matter what looks you get. If you're assigned male at birth, teach yourself to do makeup. I did it. It was fun. Buy and read a banned book with your friends. Visit the central neighborhood of your nearest big city and walk, bike, bus, tram, or train around, savoring ideas and finding which ones you can bring home with you to your community. Get involved in local government and make friends with your city council person or state representative if they're democratic and not a theocratic genocidal fascist. Join a street protest over your lunch break. Go to a drag show. Celebrate Pride and Juneteenth. Stand up for the rights of your neighbors of color and local newcomers. And remember, if things get truly bad, they can't arrest us all if we all stand together. Fight back in every way you can. This is the only chance we have at making a better future. This has been episode 6 of the Proto-Future podcast. It's up to us now. The theme music is Spark of Life by Benjamin Lazarus through Tribe of Noise. I would like to thank my extremely generous, patient, and contributive patrons Pedro Reyes, Andrew Laverghetta, Ron Kleiss, Bill Ford, and Linda Eskin. If you would like to know more, you can visit the website at www.bgtmrring.org. That's Bravo Golf Tango, Michael Romeo Romeo, Indigo November Golf, Oscar Romeo Golf. To listen to the Manifesto and Prologue series, watch the Modern Modeling Clinic anthology, or read the free-to-access Patreon production blog. And please consider donating on a monthly basis to help defer hosting and equipment costs, support what I do, and help my fleeing to a more transphilic country for my own continued safety. This podcast was written, recorded, and produced on the ancestral lands of the Susquehannock tribe. I would like to thank them for their historical stewardship of central Pennsylvania, and sincerely apologize for how the fuck these crackers voted recently. Thank you very much for listening. Keep riding trains while they continue to exist. I beg of you, for the life of me, keep punching Nazis, and I genuinely hope for my continued existence and safe retirement, keep building a better future. We're fucked.